nefarious filthbird at headquarters, in the hunting team's administrative zone. Thump! A huge venom wyvern descended from the sky and created 2 large depressions as its feet touched the ground. A black shadow flickered, and a robed Magus jumped off the back of the wyvern. My lord! My lord! An old Magus saw the venom wyvern, his eyes brightening as he approached them. Old man, we'll need to have some words about you escaping at the last minute. Leyland couldn't be bothered to deal with him and entered the hall. Vice team leader, Lord Caesar is looking for you. 2 hunting team magi came before Leyland and bowed slightly, their manners impeccable. Though Leyland had no real power in front of Caesar, ordinary members like them were small fry. Those who had offended him the other time were still in isolation. Hence, these members were extremely respectful to Leyland, or at least on the surface. Great timing, I was just about to look for him. Leyland nodded slightly. Ka-cha, the door opened, revealing Caesar's figure behind the office desk. The 2 magi who had escorted him here quickly left. Magus Leyland, you're just in time regarding the previous mission. Before Caesar even spoke, a huge metallic piece was firmly thrown onto the table. It's done. On this huge silver-white metal, there were indents that formed an old, wrinkled face. Metallic life form. Caesar was slightly suspicious, but at the thought of something, his eyes suddenly opened wide. I need to inspect this. After speaking, Caesar took the metallic sculpture and jogged out of the office, leaving Leyland alone inside. Though Caesar had issued this mission before, not in his wildest dreams could he have expected Leyland to actually complete it. After all, Marb was a Magus on the same level as him. However, Leyland had given him something that looked like Marb's head. How could this not astonish him? In that moment, Caesar even had the suspicion that Leyland had brought a random head to escape punishment. Creak. 10 minutes later, the door opened once more. Caesar appeared in front of Leyland, but his expression was dark, with even hints of shock in his face. I didn't think you would actually be able to do it. Caesar could not conceal the shock and curiosity in his eyes. If it's possible, could you share the process of your mission with me? You know, as the hunting team leader, it's necessary that I know about the entire process and then give rewards accordingly. Caesar spoke indifferently. It was very simple. Leyland unfolded his arms. After taking on the mission, I was going to look for you, but coincidentally saw him heavily wounded, which is how I completed this assignment. Magus Leyland. Caesar's face darkened further. Please speak the truth. That's what happened. I even brought along a neutral wandering Magus. If there's anything else you need, you can just ask her. Leyland was indifferent. In reality, as long as one was not completely blind, anyone could see this was an excuse. But so what? Marb was dead. If Leyland said he was heavily injured, that must be the truth. As for that female Magus, she was just a semi-converted Magus. How could she tell the state of a peak rank 1 Magus injuries? You! Caesar's face began to flush. In that instant, he suddenly seemed to have thought of something, and his entire body relaxed. No matter what, Magus Leyland, you have disposed of a peak rank 1 Magus from the other faction, thus showing your loyalty to 4 Seasons Garden. Your bravery will be known by all light magi, and you might even be recorded down in history. Caesar congratulated him with a fake smile. Thank you for your compliment, but I want to know more about the substantial rewards I will be getting. Leyland nodded nonchalantly and then spoke. For him, having a reputation wasn't all that important. With the prerequisite that the situation would not be unfavorable to him, he was, of course, willing to do some good deeds and obtain a good reputation. However, if there were no advantages and him needing to put in so much effort, making a name for himself in history was just something that only idiots would bother doing. Ha! Caesar breathed in deeply to calm the fire within his heart and said icily, there will naturally be rewards. As for any promotions, that will have to wait. However, the contribution points have already been issued to you. 1,500 points. Don't worry, the organization is very strict when it comes to things like this, so I don't have the authority to dock points from you. Immediately after, Caesar produced a green crystal card from within his robes and passed it to Leyland. An obscure look flashed past Leyland's eyes as he held out his hand to take the card. Ka-cha! That instant he took the card, a slight explosion happened. Leyland and Caesar's bodies shook for a second, and they immediately sprang apart. What a terrifying rate of improvement! Magus Leyland! His expression held a trace of fear as Caesar looked at Leyland. Before, he still had the confidence that he could suppress Leyland, but now, after the probing, He found that this Magus who he had looked upon with contempt had already caught up to him and become a mighty peak rank 1 Magus. He might even be stronger than him. Caesar could not be so casual with Leyland any longer. Leyland's ranking in his heart had already risen to the same level of opponents who were of equal strength as him. Leyland only gave a slight smile in response to Caesar's exclamation. He had even concealed a part of the strength of his Warlock blood. If not, Caesar might be completely stunned. He took his own contribution point card and swiped the green crystal card above it. Beep. A light flickered and the 0 on Leyland's own card changed to 1500. All right, Magus Leyland, you may return and take a rest while waiting for news from the elders. Caesar spoke slowly. Leyland's transformation made him feel a little uncomfortable. He was currently in need of some time to come up with a counterplan. Thank you. Leyland stood up and took a small bow, each action revealing an unspeakable sort of elegance. Really? His strength exceeds yours. In a room made primarily out of plants, Reynolds placed the white porcelain cup on the table, a hand supporting his forehead and a finger curling his hair. Another hand was unconsciously striking the table, producing the dull, thud sounds. The current Reynolds looked like an old man who was not in the best state of mind, but all those who were familiar with him could tell this was him pondering over something deeply. Caesar stood aside, waiting for the final decision from this elder of the Four Seasons Garden. If that's the case, we'll give him the position of the head of patrolling at the headquarters. Reynolds thought over this for a long time, till the steam from his porcelain cup had vanished, before speaking. All right. In response, Caesar merely nodded. Also, I found out that we might have paid too little attention to that guy. If there's time, I think I want to meet him. Reynolds stretched, looking pleased as he glanced at Caesar. Don't you know how rude it is to bother an old man who was planning on taking an afternoon nap? My apologies, I'll take my leave now. Caesar quickly bowed and left, a mysterious grin about his lips. Leyland Farlier. Behind him, Reynolds mouthed this name. He had naturally taken Leyland's talent into account. If he was truly sincere about joining Four Seasons Garden, and that the value of the item he had gotten from the ruins was not too high, Reynolds would not go so far as to do anything dirty and covet his inheritance. However, from how Leyland had been able to improve his strength so quickly, what he had obtained was definitely not as simple as he had thought it was. It was extremely beneficial to the user, and was worth the risk for Reynolds to take action. In addition, based on the information he had gathered, ever since Leyland entered Four Seasons Garden, he still had dealings with dark magi. He was even involved in a few of the large incidents in Nightless City. This was just intolerable. Any organization would not put up with the existence of disloyal members. Though this was just a hypothesis, this was enough reason for Reynolds to make his move. He was an existence that had stepped into the level of rank 2 magi. The difference between magi from each rank was like heaven and earth. Even if Leyland received some amazing inheritance, as long as he had not promoted to a rank 2 Magus, he was powerless in front of a true rank 2 Magus. Just the fact that he could solidify his spiritual force was enough to suppress most rank 1 magi. At this point in time, Leyland was oblivious to all this. He was currently in a laboratory, holding a test tube that contained a gray liquid within. His blue eyes flashed as he constantly scanned the contents. The solution that contains a nefarious filthbird's feathers. Rumors have it that the ancient nefarious filthbird and Trial's eye were nemesis. Its feathers also carried with it the chaos its original body was known for. It is an item that swindlers love. The conclusion that the AI chip was presented in front of Leyland's eyes. Based on the information and simulations, this solution is able to take care of the oath I made with Four Seasons Garden. But what happens after? The problem I have isn't just with the oath. Leyland mumbled to himself and looked at his stats once more. Leyland Farlier. Rank 1 Warlock bloodline, giant Chemian serpent. Strength, 20.1 agility, 13.4 vitality, 25.9 spiritual force, 76.1 magic power. 76 magic power is in synchronization with spiritual force. Elemental essence conversion, 90%. Status, altering heart, progress at 69%. The heart is the location where the giant Chemian serpent's blood was produced. Through the alteration of the heart, ancient warlocks obtained similar vitality and abilities to produce blood. Headquarters patrolling inspector, a very large increase. Seeing that in his refreshed data, the progress of his strength and spirit and his elemental essence conversion all had a huge change, Leyland wore a pleased expression on his face. For an official Magus, making any progress was exceedingly difficult. Even for a Magus like Leyland who had a high-level meditation technique, they would need to accumulate a lot of time. But now, after the second transition of his bloodline, his average data had risen to that of a peak rank 1 Magus. And after his heart had been remodeled, it was incessantly stimulating the potential of his body towards a higher evolution. Only in these past few days, his reformation rate had increased by 8%, and this had brought about an amplification in his other data. This was absolutely terrifying. If it is like this, then maybe I can. Leyland quickly calculated in his mind, and after which, his eyes emitted a dangerous beam of light. This beam was very pure and immeasurable. Leyland's eyes, which were brimming with this beam, felt as if it could even absorb a person's soul. But a split second later, Leyland had already hidden this beam deep inside. The solvent of the nefarious filthbird's feathers. Leyland once again focused his attention on the gray solution, and a blue ray of light from the AI chip flashed occasionally as he scanned the test tube, and a large amount of data was being projected in front of Leyland's eyes. "The void hallucination flowers!" exclaimed Leyland, as he saw the 3 crystals on the experiment table. Deeply entrenched within these tiny crystals were white flowers that were so transparent they were almost illusory. This flower was the principal ingredient in many ancient potions. These had previously been extinct on the south coast. It was unknown from which secret plane did 4 Seasons Garden discover this flower. Its value was 50 contribution points. "Crystal seal undo." As he reeled off several complicated words, Leyland pointed his right forefinger at a crystal. Glug. A noise like the ripples on a pond could be heard from the surface of those crystals. The ripple continuously distorted as it extended to the interior of the crystal. When with an asterisk clink, fizz, noises like waves rolling and volatile steam evaporating, the solid crystal continuously vaporized into the air. Finally, what was left behind was a delicate, small, white flower that slowly fell onto the surface of the experiment desk. This exclusive seal removal technique was something that Leyland had obtained from the contribution hall. If he used other magic spells to forcefully remove the seal, though he would be able to effectively remove the seal, the aftermath would be that the material sealed within the crystal would also have perished. Leyland scrutinized this ancient and precious ingredient. The void hallucination flower was a very delicate existence. It was the size of a quail egg. Moreover, some veins, like those on a leaf, appeared on the translucent surface of the flower. This void hallucination flower, the moment it was exposed to the air, it fell down and started to melt. This is truly a fragile thing. No wonder that it is now extinct on the entire south coast. Leyland muttered this as he used a pair of white tweezers, which he had prepared for such a situation, and quickly put the flowers inside a blue Borneol beaker. The properties of the void hallucination flower are very surreptitious. By blending it, one can form 43 different kinds of ingredients. Thus, it was a popular major ingredient of many of the ancient potions. Leyland mumbled, and seeing the continuously dissolving white flower inside the beaker, the corners of his mouth curved into a smile. "Patrolling troops at the headquarters. What is the position?" Leyland gaped in amazement at Caesar. After a busy evening within the lab, he had just come out for a well-deserved rest when he saw the Magus Caesar. Caesar's face was all smiles. The vertical third eye in between his brows, which emitted a furtive radiance, now appeared to be gentle. "This was a position personally drafted for you by Chairman Reynolds." Caesar laughed and gave an explanation. "You know, during wartime, 4 Seasons Garden's rule is that the elders have the authority to set up new posts, and this head of the patrol of the headquarters is one which Lord Reynolds has specially endorsed for you, Leyland. In theory, in the Eternal River Plains secret plane, regardless of the headquarters, every branch and hunting zone's magicians all will be under your supervision." "Is that so?" asked Leyland, expressing his skepticism. This was clearly a troublesome task. It had no clear-cut authority and only had supervisory power. It seems that in this post, he could manage everything, yet do nothing at the same time, and also would be able to offend more people. After all the leading magi of every branch and every hunting zone were each powerhouses in their own right. How would they listen to orders given by a central supervisor? It was obvious that this Reynolds had thrown an annoying task towards him. Also, before I came, Lord Reynolds also made a private request. After handing over the appointment letter to Leyland, Caesar brought up yet another matter. A private request? What is it about? Leyland looked alert. A rank 2 Magus was not someone his current self could contend against. However, the current him, even if he is unable to defeat his opponent, he still had his means of escape and therefore, he was not particularly afraid. Lord Reynolds is trying to find some time to talk to you. Of course, this will be private and is not an order. Seeing that although Leyland was beginning to get nervous but still managed to appear calm, a flash of amazement appeared in Caesar's eyes which he quickly suppressed. He meant to convey this to Lord Reynolds. A lengthy conversation. Leyland's heart throbbed. It seemed that his recent chain of high-profile actions finally came to the attention of this rank 2 Magus. However, this was also a part of his plan. Thus Leyland nodded and said, "Certainly, I can meet with Lord Reynolds. It is my honor to do so." "That is good. I shall immediately go and make some arrangements." Lord Reynolds was the overall commander for 4 Seasons Garden within the Eternal River Plains, Secret Plain. He handled numerous matters every day, and if it were not for Leyland having performed such a meritorious deed, he would not have had the opportunity to see him. And this time, the meeting was of a private nature. There were many protocols for this. But Leyland need not pay attention to all this. Caesar could arrange for the time, and when Caesar calls him, he could go to meet Lord Reynolds. "Thank you very much." Leyland gave a nod of thanks. "Don't mention it. It is nothing." With his face full of smiles, Caesar, very quickly, left. Seeing Caesar disappear into the horizon and finally vanish from his sight, Leyland appeared more and more solemn. Finally, his expression turned as dark as ominous clouds. This Reynolds, a rank 2 Magus, now seemed to him like a mountain extending as far as he could see. "Everything will soon begin," Leyland whispered, inside the Merit Points Exchange Center. "Hello, sir. May I ask if you need to do any transaction?" Behind a transparent glass window, an employee asked Leyland. Through the glass, Leyland could see shelves all over, covered with all kinds of precious objects and high-grade information. There were even many magic artifacts and single-use-only scrolls, and also some secret techniques used by magi. These secret techniques were the skills and application of spellcasting these techniques could, often, only be learned by official magi. After having successfully learned them, they could be used to temporarily increase the magic power, or increase the might of a magic spell to the maximum and the sort. Leyland had viewed them as the next best thing after high-level meditation techniques. Even if a Magus's degree of elemental essence conversion was sluggish, he could use these secret techniques and increase his magic power. This was no different to increasing the elemental essence conversion. Unfortunately, this was only an exterior item. The body's own strength is the most important. But even if the elemental essence conversion and secret techniques can amplify the magic power, this also depended on the original might of the magic spell. The foundation was sturdy, and the growth rate was high. It was the most useful for a peak rank 1 Magus. If the foundation was not good enough, no matter how high the growth rate was, they would not be able to beat another Magus with a low elemental essence conversion but solid foundation. All in all, among the spells that increase amplification, the most specialized magic spells can only amplify the basic power by 40%. And the most amplified power of elemental essence conversion was not greater than approximately 90%. Be it whatever type of amplification spells, up till now, Leyland hadn't seen any which was capable of providing a 100% or more of power. It was as if there was an invisible wall blocking the steps of the majority of the magi. "I am the new patrolling inspector from the headquarters. I believe there is a problem here with the transactions." Leyland took out the recently received appointment letter and flashed it at the employee. The magical radiance on the letter was a characteristic of a rank 2 Magus and caused a blinding pain to the employee. "My lord!" The employee was dumbfounded. After all, this position was really bizarre. It could inspect any activities, but in reality, the authority to actually execute anything was not that powerful. While stalling Leyland, the employee pushed a red button located under the desk. Leyland noticed this small act, but he smiled and did not do anything about it. "My lord, our transactions here are completely equitable and in keeping with the laws, and it is definitely not." While the employee was still explaining to Leyland, a translucent shadow took form in front of Leyland. "I am Pierre. I am in charge of the transaction of merit points. Do you have any problem, the new patrolling inspector, Lord Leyland? The Shadow's face, on the exterior, looked to be about 50-60 years old, a male. He wore an eyepiece on one eye, and his hair was combed carefully and well-groomed, and he wore a dark red-colored formal robe, which did not have even a minute crease upon it. This image caused Leyland to recall the land surveyors and gem appraisers of his previous world. And the fact that he knew Leyland's identity so fast showed this in charge Pierre's capabilities of gathering intelligence and his wide network. I have my doubts that the exchanges here and the permissions I need to examine, Leyland stated this matter-of-factly. He deeply understood this authority he owned had an expiry date tagged to it. It was all the more so, especially when it was a predestined rebellion. Dwindling from this inessential role that Reynolds had assigned him as the headquarters patrolling inspector, Leyland could tell that Reynolds had designs on him. Even if it had nothing to do with the suspicion of him being a dark magi, the fact that he increased his strength so quickly had caused Reynolds to be wary of him. In this situation, no matter how hard he tried to keep himself low-key, it was useless. Since it was like this, why should he not use that bit of power he possessed and gain some benefits? After all, before Reynolds officially stripped him of his role, his cover as the patrolling inspector at the headquarters was still able to intimidate a great number of people. For instance, like this man in front of him, at the Merit Points Exchange Center. Are you trying to tarnish my reputation? Upon hearing this, the face of the apparition called Pierre darkened, eyes seemingly producing crimson rays. No, not tarnishing it. This is just the usual procedural checks. Leyland smiled gently. The instant the words left his mouth, a ring of energy particles exploded between him and Pierre. Rumble. Though the two of them had tried their best to suppress the excess waves of energy from their battle, they still attracted the attention of several magi bystanders. Pierre took several steps back before rebalancing himself, revealing a shocked expression on his face. A peak rank 1 Magus. Seems like metal lunatic. Marb really did die by your hands. This information had been proved right before him, and he could do little but be in shock. Just from that short fight, Leyland had revealed a strength that could rival a peak rank 1 Magus. Based on the information he had gathered, Pierre was almost sure that the metal lunatic Marb of the Lilital family had most certainly died at Leyland's hands. Goodness, even Pierre himself was but a peak rank 1 Magus. Peak rank 1 Magus Marb had died at the hands of Leyland. In a situation where a rank 2 Magus did not make his move, a peak rank 1 Magus was already the strongest in the South Coast. It was rare that they were taken down. Furthermore, it was only because it had been only a short time since Marb had died, so the news did not travel far yet. Otherwise, this would cause a huge commotion in the South Coast. Pierre, who was aware of this news, was even more fearful of Leyland. What do you want? Pierre did not look good. Nothing much, I'm just thinking. Leyland's voice went so soft to the point that he simply closed his mouth and transmitted a message. Upon hearing his transmission, Pierre's face changed, first flushing as if he had been humiliated to the extreme, and then turning into a look of pondering. Moments later, Pierre raised his head and glanced at the magi nearby. Due to the strange actions by Leyland and him, they had attracted the attention of many surrounding magi and acolytes. This caused him to come to his final decision. This isn't entirely impossible. Come with me. The apparition called Pierre disappeared, leaving behind red energy particles turning into various signs that showed him the way. Upon seeing this, Leyland grinned. He was aware that even amongst the light magi, there weren't that many people who were incorruptible. At the Merit Points Exchange Center, it was a trading place where one could obtain the most profits. It was definitely not a place free of bribery, but if Leyland really wanted something from this place, it would be his last day with his current role as patrolling inspector. However, he had not forced the other party to do anything. He had merely pointed out a few of his requirements and resulted in the other person making a concession. Uncaring of the strange looks from the Four Seasons Garden Magi, Leyland followed the signs came to a house behind the exchange center. In front of the door, a Magus who looked just like the apparition was already in wait. The one who appeared this time was a real body rather than an apparition. You're here. Pierre's face was dark. Of course, regardless of who it was, nobody would be in a good mood if someone came up and tried to take advantage of them. Chen. Leyland briefly nodded his head and did not speak further. Pierre gave Leyland a meaningful look as if trying to inscribe his appearance to memory. Come with me. Next, without waiting for Leyland, he simply stalked off. Leyland rubbed his nose, and with a smile he followed. On the way, various seals and defensive layers were seen everywhere, but with Pierre, who was familiar with this area, it was obviously a smooth sailing. Ka-cha! Pierre produced a black copper key and opened a large door, which was full of runes on the surface. Rumble. In an instant, the sparkles of various treasures and crystal balls, as well as the smells of many precious ingredients, filled Leyland's eyes. In front of him was an impressive, huge storage warehouse. Various precious resources were placed in front of him, so much so that it seemed they were endless. With my authority, I can only open this secondary warehouse to you. Also, I can give you a 40% discount. That is the bottom line. Pierre was resolute. From his wounded expression, it was obvious that these were his limits. Hence, Leyland did not press on. All right, I won't be too difficult to you. Leyland spoke without sincerity and walked into the warehouse. The way Leyland treated this place like it was his own home had Pierre grinding his teeth in annoyance, but he did not dare say anything else. To be honest, there was something here that would result in him being apprehended if it was ever found out. He would be stripped of his position and would even face punishment. Compared to this, letting Leyland taking advantage of the situation wasn't much. Leyland walked past piles of potions and ingredients that were worth thousands of merit points, looking rather calm. For him, there were very few items that he coveted. In addition, what he was in urgent need of were methods to increase his battle power. Hence, a few offensive techniques were of more value to him. Leyland's footsteps did not stop until he came to the side of a wooden frame with an intellectual crystal ball on it. Research, experiments, secret techniques. At the side of the frame, there were all sorts of detailed inscriptions that recorded all sort of intellectual type information and what they included, making it easier for Leyland to search through. He came in front of the column that had secret techniques. High energy eagle eye, dog nose transformation, liver transplantation, fire elemental negative energy layering spell. All sorts of secret techniques, with some that even Leyland had not heard of, were displayed before him. He was almost getting dizzy with the sheer amount there was. Excuse me, can you deactivate the defense formation? I want to take a look at the content. Though Leyland sounded apologetic, his actions were nothing but that. You! Pierre was speechless but still headed over, fished out a token from his robes and flashed it at the frame. Wang. A milky white magical light was emitted from the token, and soon after, the spell defense formation around the frame deactivated. With my authority, you'll at most be able to see the first 1/3 of the contents. Any more than that and the spell formation will start working again, and I have no way to do anything about that. Pierre spread his hands while he explained. That's enough, Leyland nodded, taking the information that recorded the way to have Eagle's eyes and sped through it. On the surface, he was skimming over the crystal ball and trying to find the information he wanted, but in actuality, the AI chip was hard at work in his brain, recording down all the information he read through. There he only had access to 1/3 of the information. This was already enough for the AI chip. Based on that, it could deduce the rest of the information. It was just a matter of time. Half an hour later, Leyland had already looked through all the information in the intellectual crystal ball. The AI chip had benefited greatly as well, having recorded down a lot of precious information. Give me this projective technique, dire bear transmutation and bloodline modulation theory. Of course, the AI chip was not able to infer all information in its entirety. Behind the clauses that the AI chip came up with, there was a list of ingredients that could not be deduced. Leyland looked around and, based on his needs, asked for a few more items. Not counting the miscellaneous items, the total comes to 1,000 merit points. With the discount, it is 600 merit points. With this, he was able to save 400 merit points. Even if the team leader Caesar were to come, Leyland estimated that he would at most get a discount of 20%. However, he had been able to get a 40% discount on any of the items in this treasure house. And this, that, give me one of all that. Leyland very quickly spent the 1,500 merit points he had just obtained. Hours later, Leyland left the area under Pierre's gaze as if he had met a calamity. What a great harvest! Leyland rubbed his sack that was full to the brim and sighed in contentment. If only I could come here once a day. Leyland was aware that this was just delusional thought. If he did this once more, it would backfire on him and result in a huge counter-attack from those who had a vested interest in the items. He was so arrogant, and that was only because he had no intentions of sticking around in Four Seasons Garden. If not, in a light magi organization, this would cause public anger. There were plenty of ways to kill him. After fishing up all the benefits from the Merit Points Exchange Center, there's still somewhere else. Looking at the vast eternal river plains, secret plain, and the steady stream of magi constantly entering, his lips twitched and he began to give a bright smile. Days later, tales of Leyland were spread throughout. Metal Terminator, Greedy Dragon, these were his newest nicknames. Metal Terminator referred to his battle achievement of killing off the metal lunatic, Marb. It was in this battle that Leyland had openly killed a peak rank 1 Magus, thus setting the foundation for his reputation as a powerhouse. As for Greedy Dragon, this referred to the series of robbing activities he had done without restraint. Whether it was at the Merit Points Exchange Center, the defense team, garrison, and even a few magi divisions and zones, they had all been places he had pillaged and extorted from shamelessly. To be honest, the greediness of magi truly exceeded his expectations. In all the areas he had checked on, none were upstanding people. No matter how well the accounts had been done, with the terrifying abilities of the AI chip, nothing escaped his eye. Using the solvent under the circumstances, each division could do little but pinch their noses in distaste while they did as Leyland wanted. However, his reputation had gone straight to the gutters and had gained him the reputation of least welcomed at all divisions. To be honest, when he had first received news of this, Leyland was a little surprised but found it very amusing. In the Magus world, strength was to be respected. Reputation wasn't entirely useless, but it only applied to those within the same ranks of strength. As long as he continued to improve his strength, after he advanced to become a rank 2 Magus, these people would stick onto him like dogs, wagging their tails and lamenting that they had not let Leyland taking more advantage of them. Magus Leyland, Greedy Dragon, Lord Reynold would like to see you tomorrow at 7 p.m. Please be prepared. Caesar expressionlessly announced in front of Leyland and left. This is a little earlier than expected. Have I finally angered the heavens? Leyland laughed without fear. He did not take his position as the patrolling inspector seriously, and on top of that, he had been doing all sorts of things. It was no surprise that all of the Four Seasons Garden viewed him as an enemy and opposed him. If he did not make any preparations, he was going to die. This was definite. After all, Leyland himself was not completely innocent, and investigations would spell his downfall. In addition, the inheritance from the great Magus Surhome would definitely attract the attention of rank 2 magi. In the Magus world, there were all sorts of spells that could be used to detect lies and test one's spirit. The reason the magi here did not use them was because they were light magi and did everything in sequence. However, this was wartime. Everything was about power. Furthermore, there were also a lot of mysteries about Leyland. Currently, if any of these spells were used against him, he wouldn't even have the chance to explain himself. Actually, Leyland had long since suspected that the Four Seasons Garden had discovered his activities with the Dark Magi. Though he left no proper evidence, there might have still been some traces left behind. If not, why would he, a high-level potion master who was young, talented, and sure to be held in high regard wherever he went, be assigned to this place to fight? But this is enough. Leyland's lips quirked in a slight smile. He had already been mentally prepared to be found out. After all, Magi had too many unknown methods, and he had no way to guard against everything. Being able to have up to 2 years and allow his bloodline to transition, as well as being able to accumulate a large amount of resources and knowledge, had Leyland feeling quite satisfied. It looks like it's time to fall out with them. Leyland looked apathetic. Theoretically speaking, he was the one who had betrayed the Four Seasons Garden, but this was for his own sake, for benefits, to chase his dreams. He was not going to turn back from this route. All right, I'll use this. Leyland turned over to the palm of his hand, revealing a well-preserved test tube in his right palm. Within the test tube was a gray solvent. It was a type of gray that people would find disgusting, and just a glance at it would cause one to feel dizzy. The solvent of the nefarious Filthbird's feathers. Tests have been conducted on it. In order to break away from Four Seasons Garden and perhaps even become enemies, it's necessary to dispel the constraints of the contract witnessed by the trial's eye. Leyland stared hard at the test tube in his hand, looking unusually excited. He snapped his fingers, and in an instant, the room was shrouded in a layer of faint yellow light. Leyland then carefully removed the covering from the mouth of the test tube. TSSS. A gray gas floated out of the test tube, and upon contact with the air, the solvent of the nefarious filthbird's feathers produced innumerable tiny bubbles and began to evaporate violently. Ugh! Leyland pinched his nose tightly. What a terrifying stench! He had taken in just a small breath, yet he was already on the verge of fainting from the smell. It was just too stinky. Even with his vitality of over 20, it was almost unbearable for him. The nefarious filthbird was originally a congelation of all of the filthy things in the world, and its feathers held traces of its filthiness. In actuality, the solvent made from the feathers did not get its power from the feathers themselves, but from the projection of the nefarious filthbird's strength onto this part of its body. The ancient nefarious filthbird was an existence that was the archenemy of the Trial's Eye. Not only had their battles affected the Magus world, they also affected several other large-scale areas. There were traces of them present everywhere in legends and myths. Filth, chaos. How did these characteristics come about, and how did they work? A curiosity that could not be concealed appeared in Leyland's eyes. Whether it was the chaotic characteristic of the nefarious filthbird or the fairness of the Trial's Eye, they were very much different from the spells in the Magus world. They were more like a type of regulation, which gave Leyland the strongest urge to find out even more. Magi usually like to research about all types of strange phenomenon and strengths, as well as to try to find ways to make that power theirs. In terms of trying to chase after the truth, Magi were similar to the researchers and scientists in Leyland's previous world. It's a pity that this sort of thing can only be approached by those who are at least morning star Magi. Whether it was the Trial's Eye or the filthy bird, both could traverse through the entire world and weave through terrifying beings. Their existence surpassed that of normal beings, and they had entered a level that Leyland could not hope to even reach for, much less understand. The current Leyland wasn't even an ant to them. He was probably a little smaller than a speck of dust. Even if he wanted to offer sacrifices and summon them, he would only see an apparition that lacked power. It wasn't possible to explore and find out more about them. Even though Leyland was a little disappointed, what he felt was, even more, fire and a stronger desire within. One day, I'll reach the peak of the Magus world and make people take note of the other great existences, and chase after the truth and eternity they hold. TSSS. After the volatile gray solvent in the test tube finished its reaction, Leyland's body was engulfed by gray mist. This mist was unbearably smelly, causing Leyland to feel suffocated. The gray mist seemed to have a life of its own as it climbed onto Leyland's skin as if trying to find ways to enter his body. Rumble. Leyland suddenly felt faint, and his expression changed. Pack, pack, pack. As if provoked, several apparitions of the Trial's Eye appeared on his body. These apparitions were mostly only the size of his thumb, and the biggest was as big as his fist. There were a few mysterious threads connected to it that winded around Leyland. The power of regulation. Leyland extended his right hand, trying to touch those threads. Unsurprisingly, his hands went straight through the threads as if they were thin air. These must be the threads from the contract and regulations. The small Trial's Eye represents the agreement I had with the old witch, while the largest one is the contract I made that was witnessed by the rank 2 Magus, Reynold. The largest Trial's Eye had the thickest threads and was inseparably close to Leyland's body. Some part of him gave him the idea that if he went against the contract, these lines would break, and it would end in a result he did not want to even think about. TSSS. After witnessing the apparitions of the Trial's Eye, the fluctuations from the gray mist became more intense. Through an unknown channel, a mysterious piece of information was transmitted to Leyland. One feather solvent can only dissolve one contract. Leyland nodded and spoke in the ancient Byron language. I choose this one. He pointed at the largest Trial's Eye. Not only was the ancient Byron language the basis of spellcasting, it even held a mysterious power that allowed all beings with spirits to be able to understand its intended meaning from its words. Hence, it was a language used throughout the Magus world and in other places. Kai. After receiving Leyland's answer, the gray mist quickly became denser, and the chirps of a bird were sounded in the middle. The coarse chirps of this bird was extremely unpleasant to hear, like the bawling of a woman. Along with the chirps, the gray mist spread out 2 wings and turned into a faint, large gray bird in the mist. Is this the actual body of the ancient nefarious filth bird? Leyland carefully took down the filthy bird's appearance. However, with the hindrance of the mist, besides the bird's main appearance, nothing else could be clearly made out. Judgment, 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 judgment. At this moment, as if provoked by the nefarious filth bird, the Trial's Eye image on the surface of Leyland's body began to vibrate. Small bolts of lightning were produced around the Trial's Eye, the void crackling around them as sounds of sacrificial hymns sounded out. The Trial's Eye in the middle immediately expanded several times, powerful undulations overflowing as it tried to break through the void to borrow a bit of power from its original body. Check! The giant bird in the gray mist extended its wings, where large amounts of gray-black mist emanated. Filth, chaos. Leyland felt dizzy again and was almost unable to tell where he was. Kai Kai! The gray-black mist and blue electric currents tried to devour each other and eventually perished together. However, it was obvious that there was much more mist than blue lightning, and in a few seconds it was in an advantageous position. Kai Kai! Under the shroud of mist, the Trial's Eye shook wildly and even stopped all attempts at contacting its original body. At this moment, the large bird in the gray mist soared into the air and like a predator hunting for food swooped down from midair. Pop! With a peck from its gray beak, the apparition of the largest Trial's Eye was pecked out. Ka-cha, ka-cha, ka-cha. The threads that connected Leyland and the Trial's Eye were snapped in twain. As the threads snapped, Leyland felt his body slouch in relief, with even his spirit feeling a sense of freedom, as if a weight had been taken off of his mind. Meeting, these thin threads must represent my contract with the Four Seasons Garden. Now that they're completely broken, it must mean that I've destroyed my contract with the Four Seasons Garden. A hint of glee appeared on Leyland's face. Having destroyed his side of the contract, he could reap a lot of benefits. Leyland was now no longer under the constraints of the contract and was free to do anything that might harm the Four Seasons Garden, including brazenly killing their members. As for Reynold, who represented the Four Seasons Garden and was the one who Leyland had made a contract with, he had to abide by the regulations stated in the contract. Without evidence, he would not be able to do anything against Leyland. Also, this method of destroying his end of the contract would not alert Reynold. This was one of the special chaotic characteristics of the nefarious filth bird. Rumble, the nefarious filth bird, which was hovering in midair, swallowed the Trial's Eye down its beak. Leyland could even see a round protrusion at the nefarious filth bird's neck, traveling down and into its abdominal area. Kai Kai! After swallowing a Trial's Eye, the nefarious filth bird made joyful screeches and transmitted a message to Leyland. Trial's Eye will eventually perish, and chaos will remain eternal. More summons. I will wipe all traces of the Trial's Eye from you. Little pieces of information were transmitted to Leyland and were transformed into a form that Leyland could understand. I will do so, Leyland bowed deeply. Though he had no idea if the other party could really understand his actions, Leyland still had to remain polite on a superficial level. The nefarious filth bird nodded in a very human way and produced a long, loud cry. Amidst its terrifying, ear-piercing screeches, the nefarious filth bird's body exploded into the gray mist. The gray color of the mist gradually faded into the air. At the same time, Leyland could feel the chaotic attribute that had been surrounding him ever since he had opened the test tube, dissipating. The Trial's Eye was in existence on the same level as the nefarious filth bird, without the chaotic power that the solution automatically let out, which isolated the area. The probing from the Trial's Eye and the transmissions to Leyland would long since have attracted the Trial's Eye here. After the nefarious filth bird vanished, Leyland sensed some changes within his body. His contract with Four Seasons Garden was now completely destroyed. Other contracts with the Trial's Eye were still there, but they had no reaction, as though nothing had happened. The power of chaos is amazing. The ancient nefarious filth bird is truly the mortal enemy of the Trial's Eye. I wonder how the dark Magus behind Giant managed to obtain this solution. Leyland murmured to himself. In the South Coast, contracts made with the Trial's Eye were very common. They were very trustworthy, and there were almost no cases of them being tampered with. Besides, the feathers of the ancient nefarious filth bird had become extinct over 1,000 years ago. Hence, even Reynold would not imagine that Leyland would use this method to break away from the constraints of the contract. This power is truly terrifying. Leyland could not help but raise the status of 1,000 meddling hands in his heart. in awe of the ability of this dark Magus organization to procure a solution that was already extinct. But even in the organization, there shouldn't be a lot of this solution. Leyland was quite sure about this. If not, the 1,000 meddling hands would have used it a long time ago and wreaked havoc upon the south coast. Night descended. Though they were within the secret plane, the moonlight was still bright, making it no different from the external world. At this moment, a black figure donning a cloak that covered his face sneakily crept into Four Seasons Gardens camp and constantly moved towards the outer areas. Sheila. At a place where there was a devilish tree that was somehow divided into 3 parts, the black figure stopped and lit his hand up with crimson flames. "You're finally here." The surface devilish tree twisted for a moment, and a man's face appeared on the bark. It suddenly opened his mouth and spoke to the Magus. "Come down from here." TSS law, asterisk, as the wooden face spoke, a huge hole opened up at the roots of the devilish tree and revealed a pitch-black passageway. The Magus nodded and quickly walked down. Boom. After his figure disappeared into the passageway, the entrance immediately closed, and the human face vigilantly surveyed the area, before disappearing back into the tree trunk. It became peaceful once more, as if nothing had happened. The passageway was very long, and this Magus walked for about 10 minutes before he reached the end. At the end was a huge basement, the surroundings of which flickered with yellow earth magic. It most likely had been made very recently. In the spacious basement, there was the vague form of a giant with great amounts of green fog floating around him. Upon seeing the Magus, he seemed to smile. "You're here. Chen." The Magus nodded and pushed back the hood to reveal a handsome young face. Black hair, elegant face, fair skin, and eyes that gave off a devilish glint. Just by standing there, he was able to give off a strange charm. This person was, of course, Leyland. His eyebrows were currently furrowed because nothing good could be happening if Giant chose this moment to summon him here. At the same time, Leyland's nostrils flared. "Did you receive a lot of guests just now? I seem to sense the aura of many familiar people." Giant looked at Leyland with some surprise. "Yes, they're all our comrades from the 1,000 meddling hands. I'd already wiped off all traces of them, but you were actually able to notice. Looks like the rumors out there aren't wrong, and you're already a peak rank 1 Magus." Giant glanced at Leyland with some apprehension in his eyes. "Looks like our leader's initial choice to attract you into entering our organization was a right one." Leyland only gave a mysterious smile in reply. After the second bloodline transition, he could feel that the quality of his body constantly increasing. Even a few of his organs seemed to have awoken from a deep sleep and obtained many miraculous abilities. Though these abilities were of no help to him in battle, they could usually exhibit surprising effects at unexpected moments. "Looks like you're planning something grand." Leyland looked Giant straight in the eye. From what he had sensed, Giant had actually called out all of the elites of the 1,000 meddling hands. Getting in contact with him was a huge risk, and he had even gotten Leyland to enter the inner circle of the Four Seasons Garden. It was easy to tell what Giant had planned to do. Hee. "That's not my plan, but the idea from the Lord behind me." Giant brought up the rank 2 dark Magus behind the 1,000 meddling hands once again. "So, the feathers of the nefarious filthbird are rather useful, yes?" Giant asked. "I've used them." Leyland lifted his brows. "If there's anything you want to say it." "All right, our target this time is the resource warehouse in the Eternal Plains, secret plane that the Four Seasons Garden is in charge of." Giant told him their goal without beating around the bush. "This time, not only will our members go all out on this mission, even the Lord behind us will make his move at opportune times." Leyland's face twitched slightly at this news, but he accepted this peacefully. In the Four Seasons Garden, there was Reynold, who was at least a rank 2 Magus, taking charge. If there wasn't an opponent with a similar level of power to attract the brunt of the assault, the invading Dark Magi would just be committing suicide no matter how many of them there were. "All right, what's my mission?" Leyland inquired. "Good." Giant pointed his thumb upwards. "Your mission is simple. The time we make our move is tomorrow night at 7. Reynold is planning on seeing you, right?" Giant spoke matter-of-factly, but this made Leyland's heart turn cold. For him to know about even this, there must have been other spies from the 1,000 meddling hands in the Four Seasons Garden. But putting your hands on everything will only expose your own identity. Leyland smirked inside. Giant had not noticed any abnormalities in Leyland and was still speaking. "At that time, we will lead Reynold away. Your mission is to pass through a spell formation inside his office and activate this spell design. As he spoke, he passed a fist-sized red crystal to Leyland. Pack. Leyland firmly caught the red crystal. What is this spell design? The interior of the red crystal was laden with tiny runes. When the runes connected together, they looked like a gold liquid constantly flowing inside the crystal. Though the AI chip had never recorded such runes before, Leyland was sure that this was a spell design specially catered to a specific spell formation or artifact. After all, how could something Reynolds had placed in his own office and was personally protecting be anything simple? It's just a regular spell designed to lift a seal. It was obvious that Giant did not want to explain any further. Leyland stared at the Giant for a long time, and then spoke. You want me to do something in the area where the Four Seasons Garden has the tightest defense, which is a rank 2 Magus office. Are you trying to get me killed? As he spoke, Leyland's eyes turned into an amber hue. A powerful spiritual force with a depthless darkness quickly descended upon the area. Bloodlust and terror. Spiritual force that carried dense elemental particles with it formed a phantom of a black, giant serpent, which glided around Giant. Its eyes were fixated on Giant, as if it was looking for a place for it to sink its teeth into. Such an imposing aura and such bloodlust. How many people has he actually killed? Giant's heart went cold. He himself wasn't any good person and had taken the lives of countless people. However, compared to such a cold-blooded and strong bloodlust, he was still on a lower level than this person. What made Giant even more shocked was that Leyland's spiritual force had already reached an amount that only peak rank 1 Magi possessed. He might have even surpassed Giant himself. He actually dares to attack here. Gazing into Leyland's ice-cold pupils, Giant's heart suddenly chilled, feeling as if his opponent knew all of his secrets. Enchantment, don't worry, we won't abandon you. Giant tossed a detailed map that had a route marked out in red to Leyland. After completing your mission, follow this route, and you'll definitely be able to leave safely before any other Magi find out. The Lord behind us will divert Reynolds' attention, and will provide support as well. Giant spoke calmly, even going out of his way to mention the rank 2 Dark Magus supporting 1,000 meddling hands. It was obvious that he was trying to threaten Leyland. Leyland was silent for a while. I will try. If it was much too dangerous, he wasn't going to risk his life for this organization. All right, you'll find that this is a very simple and effortless mission. Giant smiled. After finishing this, you can rejoin us as a Dark Magi. How about it? Which academy or organization do you want to join? Just tell me. Leyland shook his head. He had no such plans yet, and he still did not entirely trust Giant's words. If one was not shrewd when dealing with Dark Magi, it was certain that they would be taken advantage of so thoroughly that every last bone of theirs will be gobbled. All right, to ensure that things go well, you will need to sign this. Giant threw a black scroll to Leyland. Leyland looked through the contents of the scroll and was amazed. A Trials I contract. After I have taken the solvent of the nefarious Filthbird's feathers, you still dare to use this. This is a special contract that the Lord behind us specifically made for you, Giant pointed out, emphasizing the last 3 words. Also, that solution was the very last one in our organization. If you can find another, we can only blame it on our bad luck. It looked like he was quite confident about this. Hee. In that case, you're the first person who dares to do something like this. Leyland scrutinized Giant and smirked. At the same time, the phantom giant serpent suddenly opened its mouth wide and bit towards Giant. Rumble. As it neared Giant, the phantom giant serpent suddenly collapsed and turned into a mass of shadow, slamming against Giant's green fog and producing the sound of waves crashing on the shore. Ha! I was just cracking a joke. I'm but a regular member in the 1,000 meddling hands, so how would I dare to pit myself against elders like you? A bright, gentle smile suddenly appeared on Leyland's expression. You'll become an elder soon enough. After this operation, I can nominate you. Giant spoke after a moment's thought. In that case, thank you. Leyland lightly tapped on the scroll, and the imprint of a black snake instantly appeared on it. Rumble. The apparition of the Trials Eye gave Leyland the feeling that this was even more powerful than the one that Reynolds had summoned the previous time. Under its emotionless gaze, the scroll in Leyland's hands began to spontaneously combust. Green flames enveloped the scroll. The moment after the scroll completely burned up, a ray of light that represented the contract and its restrictions flew into Leyland's mind. Afterwards, the apparition of the Trials Eye automatically dispersed into the air. He had skimmed through the contract. The only conditions were that he could not help the Four Seasons garden. There weren't any harsh conditions. After all, they still needed his help and could not go overboard. It didn't detect traces of the acts of the nefarious filthbird, Leyland wondered. He then left the area without a word. Only Giant was left standing quietly in the basement as if he was waiting for something. Boom, boom, boom. Minutes later, Giant's body, which was covered in green fog, began to shudder violently, and the wall behind him suddenly exploded. After the dust settled, a large portion of Giant's fog had dispersed, revealing a giant figure that was up to 2 meters tall. Crazy, that person's a lunatic, Giant murmured to himself and proceeded to laugh maniacally. Ha ha, good, interesting, things are getting more interesting. He then transformed into a green fog and drifted out of the area. Behind him, the basement gave way and dust filled the air. The next day, Leyland punctually arrived at Reynolds' office at 7 in the evening. Lord Reynolds, he knocked on the door gently. Come in. From behind the door, Reynolds' gentle voice was heard. Leyland took in a deep breath and pushed the door open. Reynolds was seated on a chair of vines, wearing a pair of spectacles as he drank a green beverage. Beside him was a little round table and a similar chair. Leyland, you're here, take a seat. Reynolds pointed to the chair beside him. Many thanks. Leyland bowed once more and sat near Reynolds. Here, try the juice of the jaded darrow flower. We're just having a private conversation now, so don't be too reserved. Reynolds seemed just like a hospitable old man. As if a little embarrassed, Leyland gave a slight smile and drank from the cup on the table. The refreshing scent of nature pervaded his taste buds and extended throughout his 4 limbs. Leyland felt as if warm water was rinsing his body and making him feel rejuvenated. How is it? It tastes pretty good, right? Reynolds asked with anticipation. The collections of an elder like yourself are pretty good, Leyland praised sincerely. Ha ha! Like a child who had received a compliment, Reynolds laughed aloud brightly. Here, let us have a friendly chat. Leyland, you seem to be from the Chernobyl Islands, right? I went there once when I was young. Resources are scarce in such a barren land, and it's lacking in magi. Reynolds was a very entertaining speaker, and he began to chat with Leyland about his past experiences. As they spoke leisurely, time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, an hour had passed. All of a sudden, Leyland suddenly smelt something very sweet. What is this? It's a type of incense from the wetland gardens. It's said to be useful in replenishing one's spiritual force and is a favorite of the magi there. Reynolds explained lightly, his voice seemingly less and less discernible. A thread of silver spiritual force slowly extended. Leyland's expression became slacker and he could feel his eyelids becoming heavier. He eventually fell asleep. Seeing Leyland in a deep sleep, a smile appeared on Reynolds' face. He took off a ring on Leyland's hand and inspected it closely. Ring of sobriety. Looks like it has a few other effects that can defend against probings. There are 7 different potions smeared on it as well. Looks like you've prepared well, but it's a pity. Reynolds glanced at Leyland with a victorious smirk. The juice of the jaded darrow flower, as well as the pollen from the intoxicated dragon petals, are something even a rank 2 Magus might not be able to withstand. What use is a mere ring and potion? These 2 items were a special combination that Reynolds had picked out specifically for Leyland. Some of them even had to be transported from the secret plane, and he had used up a portion of his allowance as the chairman to obtain the items. This had delayed his plans and allowed Leyland to have the chance to wreak havoc in the Four Seasons garden. Of course, since he had paid such a huge price, the effects were superb. A peak rank 1 Magus was an existence that even a rank 2 Magus like Reynolds needed to be careful of. Also, these magi also had special methods, and might have had a high resistance against hallucinations and enchantments. What was more troublesome was that Leyland was still a member of Four Seasons Garden, so without actual evidence, Reynolds could not do anything that might have severe aftereffects. As an experienced, veteran rank 2 Magus, this was not a problem for Reynolds. Now, using a special concoction, he had made Leyland pass out. In addition, these 2 ingredients were not harmful to the body, and at most, they would cause Leyland to faint. His resistance to hallucinatory magic would be temporarily lowered, but after this, his body would ultimately benefit in the long run. Hence, Reynolds was not going against the contract with the trial's eye. Even so, the effects of this type of hallucinogen will not last for a long time. With his body, he'll awaken in about half an hour, so I have to be quick. The vined chair under Reynolds began to move until Reynolds was right in front of Leyland. Open your eyes and look at me. Reynolds spoke lightly, his voice having a strange effect that made one feel dazed. As he spoke, silvery white rays of light shot out of his eyes. This was the appearance of the solidification of his spiritual force. Upon hearing Reynolds' words, Leyland's eyelids flickered and then opened. "Your name?" Reynolds asked, the silvery white rays so intense that they seemed to be on the verge of piercing through Leyland's eyeballs. "Leyland Farlier. Where were you born? Do you have any relatives?" The questions Reynolds asked were quite simple at the beginning, and as time went on, he went deeper and increased the difficulty. Soon enough, after tens of questions, he got into the heart of the matter. "Why were you wanted by the Lilidal family?" Reynolds asked gently, with some tremors in his voice. "It is because in order to obtain an inheritance from a ruin, I killed Bossing Lilidal," Leyland answered in a dazed manner, unable to control the words that spilled out of his mouth. "What inheritance?" The silver light in his eyes became more concentrated. "An inheritance that contains incomplete information about the branded swordsman. There's also a high-grade magic artifact," Leyland answered. "Is that so?" Reynolds shifted his glasses. "Branded swordsmen, a branch of the ancient magi." He sized up Leyland's body. "A tall and strong body with some brands on the surface. It seems quite similar to the legends." As his vitality was amazingly high, the muscles on Leyland's body were now very obvious, and he had a terrifying amount of strength within. If he tried to impersonate a Grand Knight, nobody would doubt him. "In that case, what is your relationship with the 1,000 meddling hands?" Reynolds came to the key question. Deceit asterisk rumble. Just as Reynolds was using the illusionary spell to interrogate Leyland, a mighty energy wave fluctuation came from afar. This fluctuation was so immense that even the buildings had mildly shook. "What? A sneak attack?" Reynolds stood up abruptly. A layer of white light which seemed to be a communication device shone on his body in an instant. "What's happening?" Reynolds asked indifferently. "It's the Dark Magi. We suffered a sneak attack from the Dark Magi. The first and second defense lines have already perished. We're currently at the third line of defense." From the communication device, the image of a fair-skinned, burly bloke who had donned a military uniform was projected. This was the leader of the defense team who was specially assigned to defend all of Four Seasons Garden. The expression on his face was wrought with fright and worry. It seemed that the Dark Magi had placed him under great pressure. A simple and tiny issue. "I will mobilize the fighting and hunting teams to your area as soon as possible. You," Reynolds replied to the communicative device. Suddenly, his face darkened. Through the projection of the communication device, he could see a gigantic black hand land from the skies and mash the burly bloke between its fingers. "Ah!" The burly, fair-skinned bloke cried out miserably as he produced large amounts of milky white flames. "Ka-cha! Ka-cha!" A large number of miserable-looking faces appeared on the gigantic black hand, their mouths opening wide as they swallowed the milky white flames. "Ka-cha! Ka-cha!" The bone-chilling sounds of gnawing sounds were heard. After swallowing the white flames, they actually began to gnaw at the burly, fair-skinned man's body. "Jejej!" In midair, solidified silver spiritual force appeared and formed a human face. "Reynolds, my old friend, why aren't you coming to greet me?" The face sneered. Immediately after, the huge black hand swept the area and made a mess of the Four Seasons Garden's defensive line. Under the tyrannical abuse of a rank 2 Magus, the ordinary rank 1 Magi were as insignificant as ants. Pack. The armrest of Reynolds' vine chair was needed until it broke. Shua. In a flash, he turned into a green figure and rushed out. Ka-cha! Ka-cha! After he left, his vined chair squirmed and constantly twisted, gradually turning into something that resembled a human. It stood by Leyland, who was still unconscious, as if keeping guard. Boom, boom, boom. Huge undulations from the magic that were even more immense than before traveled over. This was an intense fight between two rank 2 Magi. As they fought, they moved further and further away as if deliberately trying to avoid this area. In Reynolds' office, all of a sudden, Leyland, who had been unconscious, suddenly opened his eyes. At that instant, his eyes turned amber. Innate spell formation, Eye of Petrification. The vined human that had been keeping watch over him immediately turned into a gray stone statue. After his second bloodline transition, this spell and chem-in scales had evolved. Leyland surveyed the area and stretched lazily, fixing the ring of sobriety that was on the round table back onto his finger. Though the process was a little unexpected, nothing bad happened. Leyland's eyes were very clear. Where were the traces of him being caught in a hallucination? Previously, Reynolds had used a few ingredients and set up a trap, which had indeed caused him to fall into a hallucination. But that was just for a moment. The power of the bloodline of the ancient being, the giant Chemian serpent, was flowing in his veins and devouring all external substances. His vitality of over 25 degrees had made it easier for him to quickly come back to his senses. At that time, Leyland had beat Reynolds at his own game and pretended he was still in a daze, thus lowering Reynolds' guard. With the help of the AI chip, his breathing, his body's situation, and waves of his spiritual energy had been feigned spectacularly, which even deceived Reynolds. All that nonsense about the branded swordsman was obviously just that, lies. With the adjustments made by the AI chip, making up runes was a simple matter. Only now did Leyland have the time to really look at the rank 2 Magus Reynolds' office. Based on his interests, the office was made of plants. The bookcase and window, as well as the tables, chairs, and even a few strange books were all made of plants. The entire setup was very clever and wasn't very big, giving off a cozy and tiny feeling. "Where is the place at which I need to place the spell designed for it to activate?" Leyland mumbled to himself, producing a scarlet crystal from his pocket. The crystal now was emitting a bright red and was boiling hot. Is this some sensing technique? Leyland touched his chin, using the crystal to discern the direction in which he should be moving. He eventually found out that when he pointed the crystal at Reynolds' desk, it would emit the brightest light and be the hottest, to the point that he felt his hand was being burnt. Following the crystal, he came before Reynolds' desk. This was a large green table with rings on it that indicated the age of a tree. Wang wang. At this moment, the crystal in Leyland's hand exploded in a ring of light and mysteriously hovered in the air. "This is a spell formation that is triggered automatically." Leyland's eyes widened, and he pointed his right hand at the crystal, causing tendrils of black gas to crawl onto it like snakes. Crash! Under the shine of the scarlet crystal, the dark green desk suddenly shook, and most of the papers, quill, ink, and various items on top of it rolled off of the surface. The surface kept squirming, and the various types of plants making up the table began to grow and extend. Pack! The green desk was split into two, and under these two parts, numerous plants grew and acted like little feet which scurried away. In the place where the desk had been, there was now a huge pit. In the heart of the pit was a huge sealing spell formation that was shining with all sorts of runes that were floating around. On the surface of the spell formation, there were a few gaps. After making some comparisons, Leyland figured that the spot right at the middle could fit the red crystal. Classified information like this actually got out, and there was even a spell design specially made for this. Leyland mumbled to himself. All of a sudden, something strange happened. The scarlet crystal that had been hovering in midair suddenly burst out into blood-red flames, zooming like a fire arrow towards the part of the formation that was caved in. In the crystal, there was a requirement that required it to make contact with the spell formation before it was activated. Combined with Giant's obvious attempts at hiding the truth, Leyland could easily tell that it wouldn't be good if the crystal activated. However, there was no sense of flustering on his expression. Rather, there was a profound look on his face. "I've been waiting for this." He reached forward with his right hand. Snake binding. The little black snakes that had been crawling on the crystal immediately began to squirm and turned into a huge snake ball, securing the red crystal within. Black gas pervaded the area, on the verge of concealing the red light the crystal was emitting. Wang wang. The red crystal constantly expanded, and Leyland seemed to hear a sound of unwillingness from within. "As expected, there's even a backup plan. It's a pity." Leyland rapidly chanted incantations and sprinkled some light blue powder into the air. "Freezing river!" As he finished the last syllable of the incantation, a light blue light surrounded the snake ball. TSSSS. White threads of mist were produced, and on the surface of the snake ball, the white mist condensed and turned into a layer of thin ice. The amount of ice became greater and greater, until at the end, a thick layer of ice had been formed around the snake ball. The entire snake ball seemed like it had turned into a huge ball of ice. The red rays of light that the crystal had been producing was now completely contained within. As if it had lost its detection abilities, the large spell formation in the pit ceased its rumbling, and all sorts of runes ceased to move on the surface of the formation. Shua, Shua, Shua. 3 large ice pillars were like pylons, or perhaps chains, as they connected with the blue ball of ice. Achen. The power of this sealing spell formation is not half bad. Leyland nodded in satisfaction. This sealing spell formation was something he had gained from blackmailing Pier at the Four Seasons Garden. It was definitely something worth being kept safely in the warehouse, as it was quite effective. It looked like Pier had not given him inferior items to go against him. Leyland then shifted his attention to the spell formation that was caved in the middle. AI chip, compare the runes on the spell design. A blue ray of light brightened in his eyes and shone straight at the spell formation. A huge amount of data flashed past Leyland's eyes. Countless runes and designs were currently being compared. The red crystal from before was merely a key. The runes used on it were strange, and Leyland previously had no way to tell its function from the runes. But now, both the key and the keyhole were here. Hence, he was able to make comparisons between the runes on both ends and tell the rough functions of the spell formation and crystal. Seconds later, the AI chip's conclusion appeared before Leyland. The part that's caved in is a sealing formation, and the crystal's function is to detonate. A cold look emerged on his face as Leyland read through the first two lines. Very good, Giant. Just you wait. The AI chip's robotic voice continued to intone. Scapegoat from the energy emitted by the spell formation, analysis shows that the probability of a body of consciousness residing in the spell formation is 78.9%. The AI chip's conclusion was presented before Leyland. A body of consciousness. Leyland's eyes sparkled. Can you compare it with the database and find out what sort of body of consciousness it is? Searching. Beep. There is no such information in the database. Comparing with host bodies' existing memories. The AI chip operated quickly. Seconds later, a new conclusion was shown to Leyland. The body of consciousness emits an aura that comes from the Eternal River Plane's secret plane. Determined to be a special being from the secret plane itself. Compatibility with large platinum gate of entrance to the secret plane, 67%. Platinum gate? Leyland's eyes widened, suddenly thinking back to the platinum gate that seemed like an ancient existence, right across from the headquarters. Incomplete spiritual force waves were emitted by the gate. From the looks of it, I'm afraid that the platinum door has already evolved to have its own intelligence. However, it was removed by Magi from Four Seasons Garden and sealed here. Hence, its spiritual force waves gave me such a strange feeling. Leyland slowly came up with the entire process that led to this result. Though he had no idea why Four Seasons Garden sealed the consciousness of the entrance to the secret plane, there were only a few reasons that Leyland wasn't going to bother wondering about. What he was more focused on was what would happen to the entrance to the secret plane if its consciousness was destroyed. After all, the red crystal that Giant gave him was no unsealing spell design. Instead, it would control the spell formation as well as the consciousness within and destroy them together. AI chip. Simulate the consequences of the destruction of the secret plane's body of consciousness. Leyland spoke quietly, his expression dark and dreadful. Beep. Mission established, beginning to compare with high-level patterns. Importing data. The AI chip intoned loyally. After which, the result was placed before Leyland. Based on simulated experiments and remnants, if the body of consciousness is damaged, the possibility of the platinum gate being destroyed is 79.8%. Entrance will automatically close and be sealed shut. Another 15.2% chance of the opposite happening. The entrance will then become a public entrance and be open to any living beings. The last 5% possibility has unknown consequences. Leyland, who was silently reading the conclusion, suddenly understood everything. The most important part in the battle for the Eternal River Plane's secret plane was the acquisition of the entrance. 7 entrances had been discovered, with 4 being controlled by the Light Magi. This control referred not only to the Magi army set up on the outer areas, but also to a certain key that could control the opening and closing of the entrance. From the looks of it, these keys referred to each gate's core body of consciousness. If I detonate this area, there's a large probability of Four Seasons Garden's entrance disappearing. The Dark and Light Magi will then hold the same number of entrances, and there won't be any disadvantages when trying to take over the secret plane. Leyland could easily tell the intentions of the Dark Magi. These Magi were planning to destroy the entrance here. Gaining control of the entrance meant obtaining a large amount of land, plentiful resources, as well as a huge number of troops. Most importantly, the speed at which spoils of war were transported would be increased. Light Magi currently held possession of 4 entrances. Whether in terms of the areas with radiation or potential battle power, they exceeded the Dark Magi by a large margin. Hence, the Dark Magi had to think of ways to make up for this handicap. Even if this place was not destroyed, it was still necessary to rob this place from the Light Magi. They would rather have this place become a public domain than let it be controlled by the Light Magi. Shrewd, a very, very clever plan. Leyland, who had made sense of this whole situation, couldn't help but praise the person who had come up with this operation. However, as the very last chess piece in this game, he was in a very difficult position. If he destroyed the body of consciousness now, the gate to the secret plane would immediately be damaged and perhaps permanently lose its abilities. This may or may not be a good thing. Leyland, who had completed this task, would be held in high regard by the Dark Magi, but the Light Magi would definitely not let him off so easily. This was a decision that he needed to think through carefully. Just for that little bit of merit, was it actually worth it to offend the entire Light Magi alliance? Is there still a need to consider any further? Leyland's eyes brightened. From this crystal and the extremely opportune timing, it looks like there's someone in the shadows controlling everything. This person also has to have a high position in Four Seasons Garden, or else it'd be impossible for him to do this much. I'm almost sure of who it is. Once this operation is over, he'll be the one reaping the most benefits. I might even be labeled as a traitor and be chased to death, while he will get the most merits for everything. Leyland's lips quirked in a cold smile. Since ancient times, a spy's position was the most difficult. Even if they succeeded, if the person who instigated the operation was not willing to tie up loose ends, the spy would be the one who would stand to lose the most. Besides, compared to a lowly spy like him, there was another spy with a higher position, had been in Four Seasons Garden longer, and was an even more loyal choice. If there were conflicts of interest between them, who would 1,000 meddling hands choose? This was a rhetorical question. Besides, the contract he had signed with Giant only specified that he could not help Four Seasons Garden, but the reason he was doing this was for his own benefit. With his own desire to get some benefits from Four Seasons Garden, it was evident that he would not suffer any backlash from going against the contract's terms. Afraid that Leyland would not agree, Giant did not dare to make the conditions too strict. If the conditions stated that he had to destroy specific things, then Leyland would definitely investigate further and could decide not to sign the contract at all. Shatter! Leyland clenched his fist while facing the blue ball of ice. Ka-cha, ka-cha. Countless shards of ice fell from the ice ball, and immediately after, innumerable cracks appeared on the surface of the ice ball. Crack, 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 crack. Finally, the entire light blue ball of ice cracked, and along with it, the red crystal dispersed into powder. This spell design that would cause the spell formation to implode was destroyed by Leyland, just like that. Leyland had thought this through. It was all right to betray Four Seasons Garden. At most, he would have become the enemy to one more organization, but destroying the gate of the secret plane would mean offending the entire Light Magi alliance. The current Eternal River Plains, secret plane, was a huge chunk of flesh that Dark and Light Magi alike were waiting for an opportunity to swallow into their stomachs. The gate to the secret plane did not belong to just Four Seasons Garden, but the entire Light Magi alliance. Four Seasons Garden was but one of the characters who would look over the entrance. The moment Leyland destroyed the entrance, all Light Magi forces would lose their advantage in this battle. Since ancient times, destroying a person's livelihood was akin to murdering one's own parents. For Magi, the secret plane was a huge gold mine where one could obtain a limitless amount of top-grade materials. If he pitted himself against the Light Magi like this, he would be chased to the ends of the earth, and there would be no end to it. On top of that, all of the Light Magi powers would be working together to exterminate their enemy. The dangers of this operation were way above that of the times previously, when he had gathered spirits and plundered brazenly. In the South Coast, Light Magi were at the top. If the entire Light Magi faction was against him, it was impossible for Leyland to stay alive. All he could do was find a deserted place and live a hermit's life. If he had connections in the Dark Magi Alliance, things would still be fine. This operation would be a huge gain on the Dark Magi's side, and based on his huge contribution, he would have a comfortable life with the Dark Magi. It was a pity that Leyland had entered 1,000 meddling hands halfway through and was not as trustworthy. Otherwise, he would not have been deceived into doing this. Besides that, he had no backing in the Dark Magi Alliance and rather had some foes within. After all, Abyssal Bone Forest Academy was a member of the Dark Magi Alliance. He had brazenly killed off the elder of the Lilital family metallic lunatic Marb, which resulted in a blood debt. After considering the matter carefully, Leyland concluded that exploding the gate to the secret plane did not benefit him at all, and he would have actually become the scapegoat. Leyland was definitely not going to do something that would harm his own interests. Hence, with one last look at Reynolds' office, he ruthlessly left. Rumble. Within the headquarters of Four Seasons Garden at the Eternal River Plains' secret plane, immense energy waves from spells exploding could be felt everywhere. Mixed within those sounds were miserable cries and maniacal laughter. The Dark Magi's attack, this time, was very fierce, and they had quickly made their way to the center of the headquarters. Hence, Leyland found very few official Magi along the way. Nobody bothered to interrogate him either, so his whole journey out was very smooth sailing. Many Magi in black cloaks were freely venting their dark desires, and some Magi could be seen bursting into flames. The violent flames engulfed the area and turned the prosperous and busy trading center into a sea of fire. The official Magi of Four Seasons Garden were doing their utmost to hold back the Dark Magi while awaiting support. The Magi who had chosen no sides were around mostly to look on without lifting a finger, while only a few who were on good terms with Four Seasons Garden chose to participate in the battle. Magi were a bunch of cold people, and seeing that the Dark and Light Magi were participating in a large-scale battle, most of the Magi present chose to look after their own hide and observe. This was obviously the case for acolytes. While official Magi were fighting, they did not even have the chance to intervene. Usually, just a stray wave of magic from an official Magus could cause a large number of deaths. Things seem to be rather chaotic, Leyland laughed without care. Though he was wearing the attire that belonged to Four Seasons Garden, the expression on his face was very composed and as cool as ice, as if everything happening here had nothing to do with him. Magus, Leyland, what are you doing? At this moment, a figure rapidly appeared before Leyland. It was Dolorin. This vice team leader of the defense squad cut quite a sorry figure, his white robes torn into shreds. Blood Rogue's appearance, Magus Leyland. In my authority as the vice team leader of the defense squad, you will temporarily be expropriated. Those darned Dark Magi bastards are plundering our headquarters and killing our family and friends. I need you. Let us go and resist the enemy. Dolorin looked as if he was in a frenzy and was burning with rage. It looked like he was truly loyal to Four Seasons Garden. As a large light Magi organization, Four Seasons Garden had a very strong sense of unity. Hence, even under such circumstances, many official Magi and even acolytes were willing to risk their lives and fight. My apologies, but I won't do it, Leyland unenthusiastically spoke. What did you say? Dolorin became wide-eyed, unwilling to believe what he was hearing. I said I am now the patrolling inspector at the headquarters. Just my position alone means that I have the same level of authority as that dead team leader of yours. Even he didn't have the power to command me to do anything, much less you. Leyland squinted, causing Dolorin to seethe with rage. You dare! Dolorin gestured at Leyland, his finger trembling. Though his lips twitched, he did not say a word. Leyland's reason could not be refuted, and with his current position, he did not have the authority to order Leyland, who held a higher position, to do anything. Well then, Lord Leyland, where are you going? Dolorin suddenly asked with his fists tightly clenched and his eyes fixed on Leyland. Are you trying to mind my business? Leyland spoke in a low register as he looked at this burly man. Of course not. It's just that an envoy just came down from the headquarters and is standing guard at Experiment Zone 3. I think you might want to see him. Dolorin lowered his head, though his words showed he had no intents of backing down. An envoy from the headquarters. Leyland furrowed his brows. This was a key position and represented the will of the entire Four Seasons Garden. This person obviously had a position that was much higher than his temporary role as a patrolling inspector. Why wasn't I informed of this? Who is it? Leyland asked on. It's Lord Reynolds' personal disciple, Lord Wade. The name that came out of Dolorin's mouth was unexpected, but at the same time logical. So it's him. No wonder, Leyland nodded. Wade was a Magus who had been raised in Four Seasons Garden, from when he had been a regular human till he became an acolyte and then further became a Magus. His entire being had a close connection to Four Seasons Garden, and he was definitely loyal. On top of that, the person in charge here was Reynold, who was also his teacher. In terms of communication and connections, he had a natural advantage. It's going to be troublesome to have an envoy come down at this time. Leyland's heart lurched. Immediately after, Dalaran stared straight at Leyland. My lord, think about it. Since it's an envoy from the headquarters and the situation is somewhat dire now, I'll have to meet him, Leyland said indifferently. Surveying the area, he noted that the dark and light magi were immersed in battle and nobody had the time to pay any attention to him. Also, they were in a corner, and there was little chance of them being seen from afar. After having noted this situation, the expression on Leyland's face became calmer as he tucked his hands into his sleeves. That's good. Ah, what appeared on Dalaran's face was glee, followed by a complicated glint in his eyes, as if some sort of evil plan was brewing in his mind. However, all of this was immediately destroyed by a pair of flaming, crimson palms. These crimson palms had blood-red flames that went through Dalaran's innate defense spell formation like paper and pierced right into his chest. A flash of disbelief passed Dalaran's face before he turned into a pile of ashes under the blood-red flames. Leyland calmly retracted his hands. He was now the number one being who was second only to rank 2 magi. Dalaran was a rank 1 Magus who was not even at the peak yet. Leyland had gone all out and mounted a sneak attack, and hence Dalaran had been killed in a single attack. From within the ashes, a hint of gray light rose and turned into a gray skull that pounced towards Leyland. Oh, a secret imprint. I never expected Dalaran to have something like this. Blood-red glints flashed by his eyes, and 2 crimson rays shot out of his pupils which landed on the imprint in a straight line. SSC. Large amounts of white mist rose, and under the crimson rays, the skull imprint dispersed. It turned into little gray spots that disappeared into the air. This was the same type of imprint that Bossing and Torash, who had both been killed by Leyland, possessed. This was an imprint that Magi used to mark those they wanted to take revenge on. When Leyland was still an acolyte, it was exceedingly difficult to remove this type of imprint the moment he made contact with it. It was also easy for Magi to track, which was why he had used the most direct and simplest way to kill those 2 acolytes. But this was now different. Leyland had advanced to a peak rank 1 Magus. The imprint of a regular Magus could easily be removed with a little spiritual force. He was only fearful of the secret imprint that rank 2 Magi personally set up. A rank 1 Magus imprint was not a worry to him. Shadow clone. After doing all this, Leyland was still not content and pointed at the pile of bone and ashes. A black shadow clone crawled out from the shadows and entered the ashes. The shadow clone that was now mixed with the ashes extended, grew bigger, and became another man who was similar to Dalaran. Their faces and attire were practically the same, though the shadow clone's skin was black. It was weird and rather terrifying. Shape-shifting spell. With a stretch of his hand, milky white light converged in his palm and shot to the clone's body. Under the effects of the shape-shifting spell, the clone's skin instantly turned fair, and even gave some color to its face. It looked just like Dalaran. Go! Show your face to the Magi in Four Seasons Garden, and then find an opportune time to die in battle, Leyland instructed. The shadow clone, which had turned into Dalaran, bowed towards Leyland and dashed off quickly. Trying to make me cannon fodder by getting me to see the leader at this time. Leyland glanced at the ground, where Dalaran had once been, a tranquil expression about his face. Whether it's killing dark or light Magi, none of this has any meaning. The real treasure is waiting for me. Time is running out and I don't have time to play around with you. Leyland's original intention was to take advantage of the chaos and seize some benefits, but Dalaran had schemed for Leyland to meet the envoy from the headquarters, hence Leyland had no choice but oblige. This was the complete opposite of Leyland's intentions. Hence, Dalaran must die. It's about time for Blood Rogue to appear, Leyland murmured to himself, rays of light appearing in his right arm and turning into a crimson mask. His robes also underwent some changes and turned into a shade of crimson, a stark contrast to the original white, and looked as if it had been stained by fresh blood. His aura also changed, reeking of bloodlust and evil. Just looking at him was enough to cause official Magi to break out in cold sweat. Leyland's other identity in thousand meddling hands, Blood Rogue, now made its appearance. After having transformed into Blood Rogue, Leyland identified a direction and rushed in the direction of the Merit Point Exchange Hall. One would be an idiot not to seize benefits when possible. The battle at the Merit Point Exchange Hall was also the most intense, with various spells and energies flying all over the place. Within the rubble, Magi of the Defense Squad in the white robes of Four Seasons Garden and Magi in the black robes of Thousand Meddling Hands were now tangled together. All sorts of pieces and fragments of resources were strewn all over the ground. There was even an intellectual crystal ball that had been discarded in a corner within the rubble. From the corner of his eyes, Leyland discovered a few hidden black figures who emitted energy waves that belonged to acolytes. They must be incredibly reckless to even think of participating in a battle between Magi. These figures lay in wait at the sidelines of the battle, their greedy little eyes fixated on the items strewn all over the ground. Even if they were to pay their life for this, there was no guarantee that they would be able to obtain these items in their lifetime. Taking advantage of the chaotic situation, a few of the more daring acolytes actually began to have designs on these items. Rumble. An icy blue ray of light dispersed, and the remaining waves of energy hit one of the acolytes present. This acolyte didn't even have the chance to make a sound before he turned into an ice statue amidst the blue light. Such a miserable scene scared away a large number of acolytes. There were, however, a few lucky acolytes who successfully left the battlefield after retrieving some resources and ingredients. Though the official Magi present had discovered their presence, they couldn't be bothered with these existences that were as unremarkable as ants. Making use of the Magi's reasoning, these acolytes betted their lives and struggled towards this hint of an opportunity. They did this despite knowing that if any official Magus found them an eyesore, they would immediately lose their lives. Leyland suddenly reflected upon this and realized that a Magus path was full of blood and cruelty. He strode forth at a measured pace and entered the heart of the battle. "It's Lord Blood Rogue. Lord Blood Rogue is here." The Thousand Meddling Hands, Magi present, immediately gasped. Amidst them was a huge black rodent-like Magus who quickly got rid of its opponent and bowed before Leyland. "It's actually Lord Blood Rogue. It's been a long time." The huge rodent now had green eyes that were the size of longan fruits and looked ready to bootlick any given moment. Ever since Leyland had displayed his exceptional battle strength in previous fights, combined with Bald Venom's disappearance without a trace, this large rodent had analyzed the situation well and apologized to Leyland. It had also sent a large number of precious items. From then on, it would eagerly approach Leyland and greet him, acting just like his servant. Holy Angel N. When facing this large rodent-like dark Magus, Leyland only nodded slightly. "You're just in time. There are some areas that require your natural talent. Stay beside me." "Yes, my lord." A glint of glee appeared in the large rodent's eyes, and it quickly stood at a short distance behind Leyland. It was very clear that in this large-scale war, even for official Magi, the probability of death was not low. In order to protect itself, besides trying its hardest to raise its strength, the rodent Magus also had to have strong backers to protect itself. This was a method of survival. "Who is that?" the opposing Four Seasons Garden Magi asked in suspicion, as they naturally could not recognize Leyland as he was right now. "It's Blood Rogue from Thousand Meddling Hands." It's said that his crimes are insane, and in just the short span of a year, he's already committed 9 major crimes and has been labeled as a notorious criminal on the wanted list. Another old light Magi stared hard at Leyland, eyes revealing an unspeakable fear. Leyland merely laughed gently and approached them, while the 2 dark Magi respectfully backed off. "I'm only going to say this once. Move," he spoke brazenly to the light Magi. "Are you crazy?" Seeing Leyland actually dared to threaten a whole group of light Magi, even a few Magi from the Thousand Meddling Hands thought Leyland to be crazy. However, the large rodent and the rest who knew Leyland better could feel their scalps numb as they retreated a few steps. "Once Lord Reynold returns, the whole lot of you insane dark Magi will." A light Magus stood out and spoke righteously. However, shortly after, a translucent, black giant serpent seemed to travel through space and appeared in front of him. Extending its mouth, which was full of sharp teeth, it bit down upon his neck. "Ka-cha!" A piercing sound was produced, and this light Magus, innate defense formation, was destroyed to pieces in less than a second under the snake's bite. After that, the python directly bit the Magus' unprotected nape. The spinal cord was ripped to shreds, and flesh and blood flew everywhere. Honestly, are all of you deaf? The light Magus' corpse fell to the ground with a loud thud, and Leyland's blood-red robe seemed to produce crimson rays of light. He faced the light magi in front of him and spoke peacefully. Just what level of? This power far exceeds that of the semi-converted Magus that he had been. Upon having seen Leyland kill an official Magus in one blow, the large black rodent behind him couldn't help but be shocked. From what he knew in thousand meddling hands, there were only a few peak rank 1 magi, such as Giant, who could do this. However, another person had joined their ranks, Blood Rogue. It even went so far as to guess that Blood Rogue right now might have surpassed Giant and the other elders. At this thought, with a gleeful and an even more intense gaze that could be seen on its slender and hollowed face, it stared at Leyland's figure. Togo! He actually killed Togo. A female 4 Seasons Garden Magus looked at Togo's corpse, evidently in disbelief, and went insane. I'll kill you! With a crazed look upon her face, she was then wrapped up in a bundle of milky white light. Ka-cha! Under the shroud of light, her clothes split and revealed the curvy body of a young woman. At the same time, layers of clean white feathers sprouted out from her back, eventually forming a pair of large white wings. The holy form! Looks like she's going to go all out. The surrounding magi were surprised, and all of them had varying reactions. Some chose to retreat, others rushed in from the sidelines, and even more light magi came in and surrounded Leyland. Holy judgment! As if an angel had descended upon the earth, the female Magus' face shone with a holy light. Her eyes turned pure gold as she pointed straight at Leyland. Light, pure, clear, holy light formed a knight's lance, accompanied by a holy chorus in the background. Along with a huge spurt of energy, it charged towards Leyland. Kill him! Let's kill him! Immediately after, the surrounding light magi produced their best spells, and colorful magic rays rushed towards Leyland like a wave. In the face of such an attack, the black rodent immediately retreated, while other dark magi had long since hidden themselves away. Leyland wasn't their superior and lacked the authority to command them. In addition, as a dark magi who had committed crime after crime, even if there was a leader who ordered them to go forth, they would disobey. At critical times, they're a bunch of unreliable fellows. It's good that I wasn't counting on any assistance from them. Leyland raised both arms and loudly chanted a few syllables. Hualala. A bright crimson color stained his hands. The red was so concentrated that it looked like fresh blood on the verge of dripping down. It's appeared. The magic that gave Blood Rogue his name, Crimson Palm. A few dark magi who were concealed a distance away yelled in awe. Die! With a cold glint in his eyes, his 2 hands mercilessly scratched forward. Boom! 2 blood-red phantom claws emerged and charged towards the holy lance and the wave of magic. Rumble. On the surface of the crimson claws, large amounts of blood-red flames rose to the skies, virtually turning the sky crimson. Rumble. The flaming, sharp phantom claws slammed into the lance as well as the onslaught of spells, which produced a huge sound. Black mushroom clouds formed and rose above the explosion, the aftershocks constantly spreading and shaving off a few layers of earth. Wang wang. Countless amounts of black smoke and ash flew about, fully blocking the scene within the explosion. Coo! Coo! All of a sudden, 2 phantom claws that seemed slightly damaged charged through the layer of smoke and out of the explosion area. Huge crimson claws grabbed at the angel in the sky. Light. Large amounts of clean holy light transformed into crystal-like armor, automatically equipping itself to the female Magus. She now had on crystal armor and a pair of large white wings, looking as if an ancient goddess of war had descended upon the earth. In contrast, the large crimson claws seemed like the hands of a demonic god from the depths of hell, mercilessly grabbing towards the war goddess. Ka-cha. Large crimson claws crashed into the armor, emitting the sounds of something cracking. Under the disbelieving gazes of the many magi present, the solid crystal armor that seemed to be a product from the heavens was torn into shreds by the crimson claws. They fluttered like butterflies before they turned into little spots of light that disappeared into the air. After which, the crimson claws ruthlessly caught hold of the female Magus. The wings behind her back were forcefully ripped off, where pieces of pure white feathers drifted to the ground as if it was snowing. The huge crimson claws immediately gripped her fiercely. Pa! Like a watermelon that had been gripped so tightly that it exploded, the female Magus burst into pieces, blood flowing unceasingly. The liquid was absorbed by the huge claws, which caused its appearance to become more terrifying and evil. Beep! Power of Crimson Palm has reached the limits a second time. Layering effect achieved. 1 Crimson Flames. The Crimson Flames from Crimson Palm can be used as an area of effect attack. 2 Blood Leech. Every time Crimson Palm is used to kill an opponent, the power that is consumed will automatically be replenished after absorbing the opponent's blood. The AI chip's voice sounded in Leyland's ear. Oh, does that mean that every time I kill someone, Crimson Palm has the ability to automatically replenish its power, and that the Magus doesn't have to do it himself? Leyland was astonished. This spell was something he had obtained from the great Magus Surhome's Book of Giant Serpent. It looked like the great Magus Surhome truly was deserving of his rank as a Morning Star Magus. Just a random rank 1 spell had such frightening effects. After having absorbed the female Magus, blood, the phantom crimson claws that had begun to turn dull and start to dissipate seemed to have received some powerful nourishment and suddenly burst with crimson light. The flames that had already died down began to burn furiously upon the claws. Boom! The crimson claw pressed down. A huge palm imprint appeared on the ground with flames burning around it. The giant claw slapped a few magi from Four Seasons Garden, and due to the crimson flames, they turned to ashes. 1 strike. With just 1 strike, Leyland had killed countless official magi. If such battle achievements were to be spread, his name would be known throughout the South Coast and even go down in history. Blood. Blood Rogue is actually so strong. Has he advanced to a rank 2 Magus already? The dark magi of 1,000 meddling hands were startled by Leyland's ferocious strike and were also stunned into silence for a long while. Shua, shua, shua. Upon seeing Leyland's attack, innumerable light magi completely lost their confidence. Using various types of spells, they transformed into wind or giant birds, amongst other animals, and rapidly left the area. Leyland merely stood where he was, not bothering to give chase. For him, killing light magi was useless. What was more important was to steal resources. Boom! Yet another large claw was sent out and uncovered a passageway from the rubble. Leyland went on a wild rampage, like the fiercest animal in ancient times, and based on the memory of the route that Pierre had taken, he destroyed all the traps and spell formations along the way. In just a moment, he came before the huge resource warehouse from before. Under his fierce flames, the huge metal door was melted into a liquid that flowed freely on the ground. With his hands clasped behind his back, he brazenly walked into the large resource warehouse. "My lord, after you!" The dark magi who had followed Leyland here did not dare to be indolent even in the face of such a huge room of treasure. Rather, they respectfully allowed him to have the first browse through these spoils of war.